Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Transforming platform. My name is Tembegile Felicia Makubele. I am your host for the Are Transforming platform. Without any waste of time, allow me to introduce our guest for today, who is Mr. Mabobo. He's going to take us through a topic that we have agreed with him to talk about, which is called Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the role it is supposed to play in transforming the South African economy. So I'll allow him to actually do the justice of introducing himself, who he is, what he's doing, in order for us to get to know him, and also to take us through what this agreement is actually all about before he enter into what role it is actually supposed to play, because I believe some of the people are not even aware what this role is actually all about. So you are very much welcome. He will present and we will be given an opportunity to ask questions or to give inputs. The idea of this platform is actually to identify areas of improvement and also gaps, and then we come up with solution together. So we usually will draft a report or compile a report that we will use to engage with different stakeholders towards, improving whatever gaps that we would have identified. So I will not waste any time by talking too much, because I believe there's so much that we can learn today, but you are very welcome. Maybe some few house rules. We request you that you mute your microphone and allow the person who is on the floor to actually be the only one to speak. So if I notice that your microphone is on, I will just mute it. And I must also confess that today the network is actually giving me a hard time. So I'm hoping that we won't have any glitches. So, okay, I'll keep on muting them. So without any waste of time, I'll hand over to Mr. Mabobo. I call him Jabu, so that, yeah. But for today is Mr. Mabobo for me. I'll allow him to take us through the presentation and engage with us. Whoever you want to introduce, you're welcome to do so, because I believe your colleagues might have joined you too. But so we appreciate the fact that you have made time to engage with us. Thank you very much. And to everybody, welcome. Over to you, Jabu.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. I was trying to share the screen with the colleagues, but the technology is it's disappointing me. But I hope I'll be able to be heard, and I will take you through, because I have it on the side, so I'll just be reading on the sidelines. And okay. Good afternoon to everyone, and I hope everyone is fine on this Saturday afternoon. And as introduced, my name is Jabu Mabobo, the Executive Director of Southern African Business Development Forum. It is our practice in the Southern African Business Development Forum that whenever we start a meeting, virtual or otherwise, if we want to use the political language, we do so we will open our meetings in prayer. And since I have been given the platform to talk, allow me to open the meeting with prayer.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you. Lord God, Heavenly Father, Creator of heaven and earth, Father of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, we are gathered this afternoon, Father, to share our insights and our knowledge, my Father, on the designated topic, We pray, Father, that you'll be the one that guide and lead us in these discussions, Father. We acknowledge, Father, that we are not the custodians of wisdom, but you are. And as we are deliberating, Father, allow us to share our wisdoms and to grow and develop each other, my Father, because we learn from each other. Guide and protect us as we discuss, Father, to the benefit and the transformation of our beloved country, South Africa, and the continent at large. In Jesus' mighty name we pray, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, colleagues. Without wasting time, let me introduce the Southern African Business Development Forum, an organization which I have the privilege of being the executive chairperson. And it is an organization that is headquartered in South Africa, but we have just moved to Zambia, following what we call the Continental Free Trade. Why the move into Zambia? We looked at what is happening in terms of the integration of the region as dictated by the Continental Free Trade, that if we sit and we wait for governments to try and drive the development agenda for us, we will wait forever. If we look at the history of our continent, since the liberation of most of our countries and the attaining of independence from the colonizers, there isn't much of economic development that has happened, which has led to the successful transformation of our lives. So we said, let us take this responsibility to assist our governments and look at what is it that the Continental Free Trade or the African Union resolutions are seeking to fulfill. So it was out of that where we identified Zambia as a country that is strategically positioned within the region to say, let us approach the government and try and drive the regional integration from a strategic central position, where Zambia is neighboring 8 countries and which is strategically positioned 2 hours and all that. 2 hours flight from the neighboring countries. So it was out of that where Southern African Business Development Forum now has an agreement with the government of Zambia through the Office of the Vice President to drive the regional integration from that position. But for today's topic, when we say, let us look at the role that the Continental Free Trade is supposed to play in the transformation of South Africa. And we take it from this point and this position, the Continental Free Trade. It was launched on the 1st of January this year, 2021, after it was supposed to have been launched last year, but due to the COVID pandemic, it was shifted. Currently, Africa accounts for just 2% of global trade and only 17% of African exports in the intracontinental, compared with 59% for Asia and 68% for the EU. The potential for transformation across Africa is therefore significant. And when we say Africa, South Africa is included in there. But I want us to, in this conversation, to keep on underlining the way
We seem to have lost you, Jabu, if you can hear me. Can others indicate if they can hear him?
Can't hear him.
Okay, I'll try to get hold of him.
Can't hear him.
Yep, we can't hear Mr. Mabobo.
Yeah. Now he's off the line.
Yeah, maybe the network is not.
It's not that good
100%.
from his side.
Yeah.
Paxley, can you be able to inform him that he has been disconnected?
Okay, let me try calling him.
Thank you. Okay, in the meantime, while we are waiting for him, let me take an opportunity also to let you know that if you want to check out some of our recordings that we've had before, you can go to our YouTube channel. I think there are like 4 or 5 videos there, which you will be able to get information relating to social security, issues relating to the aspect of how we're supposed to play a role as the public.
Sorry to interrupt. My dad says he's trying to reconnect again. The network kicked him out.
Oh, okay. Is he winning though? I hope so.
Say something. This big call.
Yeah, I was still saying that you can check out our YouTube channel where also this video is gonna be loaded for other videos which we have recorded or sessions that we have recorded. Is he back, Paxley?
Yeah. Let me check if it's back.
Okay. Okay, for those who have just joined us, our guest has been kicked out by the network from Zambia, so we're trying to check if we can be able to connect again. But my name is Tembegile Felicia Makubele. I am the host for this platform, Are We Transforming? Maybe if you don't mind, you can also introduce yourself while we're waiting for him. That will actually be great to know who's with us on the platform. Can I start with Andy Siwe?
Hi, Sister Vigila.
Hi.
How are you?
Great, and yourself?
I am blessed. Thank you.
All right.
So I'm Andy Siwemio. I'm based in Oudtshoorn in the Western Cape in South Africa.
Okay.
I am currently running a transport business. I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Jabu Mabobo on 17th of April.
Good afternoon.
Okay, there he's back. But yeah, thank you so much, Andy Siwe. We really welcome you and everybody else.
Pardon, colleagues, the network is terrible, so I had to switch now and connect from the phone, and I hope it will do justice. So pardon me about that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, you can
hope
continue.
I'm pardoned.
Yes, you are forgiven. You can proceed. Can you hear me? Mr. Mabob?
Sister Begile?
Yes, sir.
In the meantime, while we're waiting for the chairman,
Yes.
I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Mabobo in 2018. Yes, I had presented my business proposal to him on how I would like to get into property infrastructure development. He was God sent to me. He took my hand from then until he had to move to Zambia early 2019. I would meet the gentleman once every week or once every 10 days. He played a father role. He was a father to me. He was a mentor to me. Things that I could not talk about with my friends, I would speak to him about it because he was once a young man, and he spoke to me as a elderly young man, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Now he's back. I'm hoping that he can hear us. Mr. Mabobo, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me? Is the question?
Yes, and you can proceed. We're just pushing by introducing ourselves, like, so we're still with Andy Siwe, but now we can proceed with you.
Hey, Andy Siwe, how are you, young man?
I'm good in you.
Good. Yeah, good to virtually connect with you. It's been a while. So to pick it up from where we were, we said the pact will create the largest free trade area in the world measured by the number of countries participating. By the time we did the stats, it was 1.3 billion, but now it's estimated to grow to 1.7 billion people across the 55 countries of Africa.
Sorry to interject. There's Miss Makasi who is raising her hand. Is there anything you would want to share with us quickly? Or was it a mistake? Okay, probably it was a mistake. You can proceed, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So the 55 countries has a combined GDP of about $3.4 trillion that the pact at the time. And the pact comes at a time when much more of the world is turning away from cooperation and free trade. We can look at that from the Brexit point of view. And the agreement aims at reducing all trade costs and enable Africa to integrate further into global supply chains. And it will eliminate about 90% of the tariffs and focus on outstanding tariff barriers and create a single market with free movement of goods and services. Let us also underline that free movement of goods and services. I will come back to it. And cutting the red tape, simplifying customs, and addressing the movement of people, labor, competition, investment, and intellectual properties. Just a second. This technology, at times when you need it the most, it does its own things. Sure, but we'll be patient. Just give me a second. Just give me a second, colleagues. Just want to sort out one thing, and I hope it will not disturb me. To those who are joining us, we are having Mr. Mabobo as our guest on our Interest Transforming platform. He's just sorting out some technological stuff from his presenting to us from Zambia. So I guess the network is not as good as it should or as compared to us this side. But I hope you're gonna be patient with us because it looks like now it kicked him out. So can we proceed with the quick introductions? Band Hill Africa, you are on our screen, so you can You can continue and introduce yourself quickly.
Okay, hello. My name is Sol Mulubi in Johannesburg. Yeah, I am privileged to join this session, and thanks to Comrade Sisa, who shared this on the IR WhatsApp group. I wouldn't have seen it. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you so much.
Sure.
And I'm upset with you, Jabu, for not inviting us.
No. It's probably something that he might have done. Are you back now, Mr. Mabobo?
No, I do understand Zambia was quite hectic this week. Maybe that's why he prioritized the developments in Zambia, the first sitting of the National Assembly.
Okay, no. We
He
appreciate it.
prioritized them over us. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Can you,
So can you proceed, Mr. Mabobo?
are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. If I may ask, just to be able to be sure that I didn't move, leaving others behind, which part did I cover? The last part which you have heard?
I think you can start from the free movement of goods and services, because that's what you said we should underline. And after that, you requested to be given a second.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Let me just take that. The Continental Free Trade seeks to reduce all trade costs and enable Africa to integrate further into global supply chains. And it will eliminate about 90% tariffs, focusing on outstanding non-tariff barriers, and create a single market with free movement of goods and services, cutting red tape and simplifying custom procedures, and will bring significant income gains. Beyond trade, the pact also addresses the movement of persons and labor, competition, investment, and intellectual property. So why I said we need to underline this trade and the free movement of people is I'll address it as I come down to that. Now we're looking at the South African government now, if they're the drivers of the economic development. And the first point that we're raising is that political parties come into power after successful elections based on their manifestos. And these manifestos become priority programs of the ruling parties in government. This is not only applicable to South Africa, but the continent at large and all the countries that, because governments are managed by political parties. The African Union and the SADC resolutions therefore become secondary to member states because their priority is to deliver on their promises which they made and to achieve that within the 5-year term of their office. And this results in most governments becoming economic development drivers, wanting to fulfill their promises to the electorate, and in most cases, excluding private sector participation and members of the opposition parties. This is not sustainable because of the limited time in office. More often than not, ruling parties want their mandates to be renewed so that they can fulfill their promises, forgetting that once in government, you have the responsibility over all citizens, not only those that have voted for you. And government is supposed to create an enabling environment for business to thrive and not be a player and a referee. So this is what we have seen and we have underlined. So if we zoom more into the challenges posed by the political situation, which I've mentioned, and I focus specifically on the South Africa, which I believe most of us know, is there's a saying that goes, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. And the factional fights of the ruling party in South Africa are not felt by the ordinary citizens only. The local and international business communities are affected too. I think we have seen the recent destruction of the businesses in the month of June and July. I think it doesn't need me to repeat, and the impact it has had on the cost of doing business. And instead of executive creating a conducive environment for business to thrive, they are aligning members of the executive according to party factions. And if you look at the complication now of the South African arms of executive, you have the national government that has the president, the deputy president, and the cabinet. And you have the provincial government that has premiers, members of the executive committee. And you have the local government that oversees 5 local municipalities, and the district municipalities as a district mayor, members of the mayoral committee, councillors, and ward committee members. You have local governments that have local municipal in the local municipalities. They have local mayors as well, local members of the mayoral committee, councillors and ward committee members as well. And you have elections in South Africa every 2.5 years. This means that focus, it's more on campaigning and aligning with the dominant faction party than driving economic activities. You have the tripartite alliance, which is the SACP, COSATU, and the African National Congress, who are also having their own agenda, but coming in under the umbrella of the ANC. And you have further the National the facilitation of an equal society to be debated before they go in. So if you look at the alignment of this, and with a dominant faction, you have to align all these political arms that have to drive economic development, align them to the allegiance of a dominant faction. And the minute you get it right in the national and provincial elections, you now have to start aligning with the local government. I think we are aware of what is happening now with the list program and all that. That is in preparation of the local government elections, which now poses a question. Are we able to now drive economic development successfully with this tight schedule that is looking at an unequal path that South Africa is coming from, and looking at the challenges of economic development that South Africa is faced with, and looking at the present political situation? Right. If we now benchmark that, when we have looked at the introduction of the Continental Free Trade, and we look at the SADC protocols on trade, and we look at it, we'll underline the number of years which these protocols took place, and which has escaped us as South Africa. The SADC protocol on trade, which was added in 1996, was amended in 2010. Is one of the most important legal instruments guiding SADC's work on trade. It is an agreement between SADC member states to reduce custom duties and other barriers to trade on imported products among SADC member states. The protocol envisages the establishment of a free trade area in the region. So it came in just before the adoption of the Continental Free Trade itself by the AU. So SADC was pushing to get this in place. Then the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan targeted the achievement of SADC Free Trade Area by 2008 and the Customs Union by 2010. Question is, has this been achieved? A free trade area in which member states agree to remove tariffs against each other, but are free to levy their on non-member nations, fostering economic cooperations between member states. A customs union adds the common external tariff against non-SADC countries, with all members in the union receiving shares from the tariff. And I think this had to be realigned now to suit and fit into the continental free trade, not only limiting it to SADC, now creating that whole market, which is now being put as the African market. which is now the Continental Free Trade. And if we look at what the World Economic Forum gives as the advantages of the Continental Free Trade, it says the Continental Free Trade, on the first point, I outlined 6 points. It says the Continental Free Trade will significantly reduce poverty. And according to the recent report by the World Bank, the trade will boost regional income by 7% or $450 billion, speed up wage growth for women, and lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty by 2035. Unskilled laborers and 9.8% for skilled workers. The second point, it has positive economic outcomes that will be varied. It estimates that the agreement will increase Africa's exports by 560 billion, mostly in manufacturing. Intracontinental exports will also increase by 81%, while the increase in non-African customs will be 19%, according to the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. And if successfully implemented, the Continental Free Trade could generate a combined consumer and business spending of about 6.7 trillion by 2030. The question is, where are South Africans in all this? Where do we see South Africans playing in this space if economic development is driven by government and is not driven by business? The third point, which is raised here, it says women stand to gain. The Continental Free Trade clearly focuses on improving the lives of women. And according to the Economic Commission for Africa, women account for around 70% of informal cross-border traders in Africa. Through such work, women can be vulnerable to harassment, violence, confiscation of goods, and even imprisonment. Tariff reduction under the Continental Free Trade will enable informal women traders to operate through formal channels, bringing better protection, as said by the AfCFTA Secretary General Wamkele Nene said. He said, if Continental Free Trade will be, it will be the opportunity to close the gender income gap and the opportunity for SMEs to access new markets. If we look at the fourth point, it says trade integrity will be at the center stage. The Continental Free Trade offers an opportunity to promote good governance, both globally and across Africa, through the concept of trade integrity, defined as international trade transactions that are legitimate, transparent, and properly priced, as a way to ensure the legitimacy of global trading systems. The prevalence of illegal produced goods, for example, the illegal mining and the fishing and all these things that go unnoticed, misinvoiced trade transactions, and the capacity in most of the trade-free zones strips governments of the revenues needed more to improve the social lives of the citizens. The fifth point being the negative impact of COVID will be cushioned. The pandemic is expected to cost up to 79 billion. It was accounted for up to 2020. And the African Development Bank said the outlook will also be drastically impacted and will strip the GDP of Africa by $145 billion, the baseline. So the benefits of cooperating will set as an example for the world. That's the sixth point. Across the world, countries are questioning trade agreements and economic integration, alongside turning away from global cooperation. Leadership and collective action. Political dynamics are driving short-termism, polarization, and isolations. Yet multiple threats demand long-term thinking and greater cooperation. And this is precisely what the Continental Free Trade presents. The question is, if it has to be imposing the long-term thinking is it a viable option if economic development is driven by government that has to be rebooted every 5 years? So we need to look at the challenges that will also be there, because there are significant challenges that cannot be overlooked. First challenge there, which of the three identified, are the implementation. A recent article by the African Center for Economic Transformation highlights how the agreement will accelerate economic transformation and help Africa escape the colonial legacy. They stress, however, that the devil is in the implementation and recommend a bottom-top approach, which focuses on national problems that require cross-border solutions, such as shared water resource, regional energy markets, and highways. And to dive a little bit on explaining that, that is what we are saying can be a great player in the transformation of the South African economy, because presently South Africa is inwardly focused on wanting to solve the problems alone, and yet the market it's outside of South Africa. If I can use an example of what we are pushing as the township economy, we are saying township economy, they are malls, but who is supplying in those malls? Do we create, or have we created ecosystems that are empowering those that are in the townships? So we drive township revitalization through the tender system, and which is not transformational in nature, because it is short-lived. You are being a tenderpreneur and continent and the neighboring countries. You only know that which is surrounding you, and you are kept in that particular space through a tender, so that those that are in power can continue to depend on you to keep them in power, because you have become their voting agent. We need you to keep us, so we'll keep on giving you, which in the long term is not sustainable. The second point being the equity. It will be crucial to understand who gains and who loses from this continental free trade. For example, smallholder farmers will lose if there is no focus on large-scale cash crop farming, which could lead into greater food insecurity and poor malnutrition. And this, I think, we are seeing in South Africa. The rich are getting more rich through the BRIC relationship. We are seeing big companies not depending on agricultural products that are being produced in South Africa, but they are getting them through the relationship from Brazil, from India, from China, repackage them in South Africa and push them into the rest of the Southern African member countries. And this is made possible by the number of the retail shops that have been opened in the neighboring countries, and resulting in the suppressing of the agricultural economies within the member states. And we end up having trade imbalances, where importing from are not the majority of South Africans that have been marginalized in the past and continue to be marginalized in this economical space. So these issues cannot be addressed by government, because government becomes conflicted. It needs to push bilaterals, it needs to receive investments, but it is investments that are at the expense of these smallholder businesses that cannot come out because no one is nurturing them. Government is not creating an enabling environment. It is seeking to stay relevant and in power. The third point being the infrastructure. And according to the African Development Bank, Africa's infrastructure needs a substantial amount of between 130 to 170 billion a year. And it has a financing gap of about between 68 and 108 billion, driving most countries out of this trade because they are not able to finance most of their most of their GDPs don't allow them to be able to borrow because they've overborrowed and they are over indebted. So they can't continue to be investing in infrastructure because of this over indebtedness. Now, coming to the proposed solutions of all this which we have mentioned above, I think most of us remember the Dutch East India Company that we came to know about it in 1602, Jan van Riebeeck. It had three purposes. The three main purposes of the Dutch East India Company was trade, exploration, and colonization. And that they did successfully well. And why did I bring it up as an example and in the proposed solution? It is because it is through trade that South Africa was discovered. The Dutch had to have a halfway stop in South Africa, in Cape Town in particular, the Cape Point. And when they realized that there is land that is mainly unoccupied, they decided to trek further into the inland. I don't want to get into that history because I might be misunderstood. But their main reason was land there, fresh food, which those that are coming will be able to have something fresh. When we have breakdowns, we'll be able to repair. And then we have this group resting there. When the other group takes over, going to India to go get the spices, come back, change from there and go back to the Netherlands. So that was the main aim. But in realizing the fertility of the area and the similar climatic conditions that were almost like that, it made them realize that we are at home. But that home was made possible by the trade because they had the resources to be able to can do whatever. So the question is, what is this continental free trade going to make us discover as South Africans? Do we know the Africa, which is the continent in which we are members and we are signatories of this continental free trade? Do we know the member states of our Southern African community? Do we have a relationship with them? Pretoria hosts the number of foreign diplomats, second to the US, I guess, and subject to correction. But do we even know where these offices are? Let me use this example here, trade. If you look at what is happening downtown Johannesburg now, when we were doing our GIPS excursion in 2015, we were taken, forgotten the street, but there are about 2, if not 3 blocks of flats that are occupied by Ethiopians. And they are trading there, brewing beautiful and nice coffee. There's nothing political in it. They are doing business and it's flourishing. You look at Pretoria and you look at the west part of it. Our Somali brothers there have conquered that space. They are supplying into the spaza shops and everything in bulk buying. They even have our police and metro police in their payroll. You look at Sunnyside, it has the highest number of non-South Africans that are in those informal sectors of businesses, be it hair salons, be it food eateries, and now taverns and nightclub, including the business of trading with our women, which is something I didn't want to mention with, but they are abusing. And if you, example, but they came down to South Africa because they've identified a business opportunity which we are missing as South Africans because government is driving economic development and you have to be politically aligned for you to participate in that space. And if I want you to be there, I'll give you tenders and create these microwave riches, which are not sustainable, right? So what is then are we proposing as a solution? It's to build a market-driven approach, focusing on the development of competitive value chains and farming systems that will lead to considerable marketable surpluses, contributing to increased incomes, trade, and greater food security. The land which is in the hands of the traditional leadership, it's underutilized. because we have put traditional leaders in the payroll of government, and we are not considering them as great stakeholders that have one of the valuable equity contribution to any business transaction, which is land, and availing that land to can plant and grow on, and then look at the outside market of South Africa as a trading market. If we look at what makes it a challenge, crossing Beit Bridge, presently as we speak, the road is being constructed and is being widened into the dual carriage, which we commend the Zambian government, the Zimbabwe government for doing that. But after how many years have they worked on that land? Which makes it very difficult for anything coming from South Africa into the market of SADC and taking it out. And if we look at the regional interconnectivity, the movement between the SADC member states is not an easy movement. If I use Zambia, for example, for the 56 years that Zambia has had independence, there's never been a road that connects Zambia and Angola being a neighboring country to Zambia. As a result, Angola is depending on Brazil for their food. And as a matter of fact, they receive their chicken 9 months after it has been slaughtered, which has already lost its taste and flavor. And yet we are seated around this market that can be captured. But because we are not driving and outwardly focusing, we are not looking at it nicely. And based on these historic challenges faced by regional communities, the recent advent of the Continental Free Trade, as Southern African Business Development Forum, we focused on the 4 pillars, which is the transport pillar that looks at your roads, your rail, your waterways, and your air. It looks at the second pillar as ICT, the third pillar as energy, and the third pillar as water and sanitation, as the bedrock of a strategy that can be used to integrate the region. And the beauty and the good news, which I will share at the end of this, it's the government of Zambia has entered into a relationship with Southern African Business Development Forum to drive the integration of the region through these 4 pillars that have been identified. And it's something that is about to be implemented now that there has been a change of the regime, because we're waiting for the elections to finish and the transition going forward. So with that said, we are saying let government govern and allow businesses to drive economic development through public-private partnership as one model that can be used as an example. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I will want to end here and open for any clarity-seeking questions on that which we have shared that can help our South African government to truly transform. Because our view is, even if we can take to the streets, ban the roads and ban the buildings, destroy the road infrastructure and say government is not transforming. Government is not in the business of doing business. Government is in the business of governing and creating an enabling environment. What are we doing as business to help these small businesses to scale up and get into the mainstream of economic participation? When are we going to stop the dependency as South Africans from grants? When are we going to stop waiting for government with this famous word, government is not delivering? There's an example we use that you give a South African an RDP house which does not have a toilet inside. They will ban it because it doesn't have a toilet inside, forgetting that that house was given to them for free. So free things are not appreciated. Let us create a culture of working with pride, because the free things cannot be transferred to be generational wealth. And working, you will never be able to transfer your pension at the end of your retirement as something that will be generational. I rest here, ladies and gentlemen, and open up for Q&As, saying economic development is supposed to be an apolitical exercise. it is not supposed to be politicized, because hunger knows no political party. Thank you.
Hunger knows no political party. Wow, thank you so very much for the presentation, Mr. Mabobo. Like you said, where are the South African and specifically women? Free things cannot be transferred, cannot be appreciated. Let government govern. With that said, we'll open up for questions and comments, inputs. Yeah, thank you so much. Is it Matoho Nolo, if I'm not mistaken, who was giving us all the summations as you were presenting, building a market-driven economy and so forth. But let me open for questions and comments. For those who joined us late, my name is Tembegile Makubele, and I am the host for the Are We Transforming platform. We are having Mr. Mabobo, Jabu Mabobo as our guest, and we are opening up for questions. You can raise your hand and then I'll recognize you, and then you can pose your question. I'm seeing Dombe Kaya still. Do you have a question? Any questions? Any comments?
Can I shoot is Bongani?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Jabu. Interestingly, the 6 points you referred to, that I think you cited, the World Bank, I think World Trade Organization and Ibrahim, I think somehow you went on to cite the African Development Bank as far as infrastructure is concerned. That is great. And I think you also come up with a solution-driven approach that you of the view, or the organization is of the view it should be PPP-driven, public-private partnership. If I am correct, you allude to the fact that let's allow the politics to deal with politics and take the whole developmental agenda to the market. Now, if we were to look at the situation, there is no track record, or there are no real vestiges yet in place that are there that will boost the creation of value chains for across the African continent, all countries to be active participants through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. If you go, for example, in Nigeria, they see some studies demonstrate that there are concerns around the liberalization of trade to participate in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. There's a bit of loss that they will have to introduce a consumer comprehensive tax to pay the gap. But in any case, now, if we're outsourcing the whole development to the market with the vehicle that you suggest, the public-private partnership, I don't seem to hear any suggestions of how we're going to finance this approach, because I think somewhere, somehow in the studies, you are aware that the African continent is financialized. The formula of the financial market, the formula of the financing in the globe, it doesn't encourage actual production. It works on speculation. I think there's literature to that. Therefore, in a state where we financialized, I'm saying, where the productive sector, where the economy is owned, controlled by the financial sector, productivity is not necessarily, it's not the priority. What is the priority is to push credit. I mean, we're aware of the fact that the 4 categories of credit in all African countries, developing countries, household, financial sector, corporate, government, are extreme. So how then are we going to really succeed if we then say now the very same market must drive the development? So if we look at through this Africa Continental Free Trade Area, I believe strongly in it. It's a good idea. It is well thought, but I think there's a lot of public relations attached to it as far as the real practicality of it. So if we were to address that, can South African business people like our organization, what is it, the Transforming Africa, whatever it is, can we really play with our counterpart in China, etc., without the interference or bringing in politics? Can we have politics that are developmental in character and design and nature, so that we can be in a position to boost these value chains? I can have a long discussion around this. I think my premise of argument with you is for to deal with the public-private partnership with the exclusion or without paying attention to the politics, can we really make success under the public-private partnership that is Keynesian in character? Even the infrastructure itself is driven through financial formulas of the globe that are boosting credit so that all households are debt trapped. All
We seem to have lost you, Mr. Mankeu. But I believe, Mr. Mabobo, you have got the gist of the question. Maybe before you respond, you indicated that, actually you said something quite profound, that South Africa was established out of trade. I noticed, Mr. Macheta, I will come back to you. You indicated that South Africa was sort of founded or established out of trade. And yesterday I was listening on TV about how the food security has been affected because of COVID-19, and the fact that the non-recognition of the small farmers or the non-commercial farmers makes it a bit impossible for them to actually grow within the country, because like you rightfully said, the bigger business, the bigger businesses actually identify only people that are having like larger or commercial farmers, or even consider importing. And you further said that with this free trade, these like small scale farmers will actually be able to be recognized. How do we as, I think, citizens contribute towards pushing, or even those who are small scale farmers, contribute towards making sure that we tap into this free trade? Like you said, where are the South Africans? I don't think many people are even aware of how they are going to participate in this kind of an agreement that is currently existing. Just park those two. I'll take Mr. Macheta, then you'll respond. Mr. Macheta, over to you. If you can hear me.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, thanks for the presentation, even though I joined a bit late, but I got the gist. But thanks very much. I agree with the speaker, specifically on trading with Africa. My input is that, yes, trading with Africa, in fact, in my view, is cheaper than trading with Europe, Asia, and the Americas, because if we do enhance or intensify trade with Africa, it will be on our own terms and more friendly. If you remember how much our farmers are suffering when trading with Europe, you send an orange with a black spot or a ton of oranges, 2 of them have got a black spot, then all of them are returned to say, no, this is poor quality. I'm not saying we should promote poor quality, but it is better. The speaker was speaking about that Angola is consuming chicken that stays 9 months on the road from Brazil to Angola. I mean, if it were coming from Zambia, Namibia, or even South Africa, it's a matter of a day or 2, then that will promote ourselves. But the other issue with the Africa trade, I think it can also promote social cohesion and integration, because obviously historically Africa was one, which I think people like Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, and the rest who have died fighting for one Africa. I'm one of them. I'm also. We would rather trade as a bloc. We will be more powerful than what we are doing now. I mean, imagine Eswatini or Lesotho trading with China as an equal partner. But if we were one bloc, maybe even in terms of this, like SADC and ECOWAS and the like, but it would be best if we trade as Africa as a union. And the last point I want to make in terms of that social cohesion, I want us to start thinking deep to say, how do we promote? Because one of the barriers to intertrade, we are trading fairly with America and Britain because of the language. And why can't we as SADC and the rest of Africa promote Kiswahili instead of, now if you listen to the AU meetings, we are divided into Anglo and Franco-African and Anglo-African. So, but if we can promote as one.
Hello, we were disconnected.
Oh, am I disconnected? Did you hear me, or do I?
No. I'll give him a summary of what you have been saying. If you can just wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What I was just wrapping up to say, let's also think about it. As much as there is a notion now that we should also promote Mandarin, but my view is that as Africa, let's think deep about language, because language is a barrier. If you cannot talk to each other fairly well, then you cannot trade fairly well. But there is this common language, which is Kiswahili, regardless of your background of French or background of English. Let me pause it there. Thank you very much.
Okay, but what he was basically saying was, it was not necessarily a question, Mr. Mabobo. It was actually an input to say that trading in Africa will actually be cheaper. And he went on to give examples of how it can be approached. Yeah, and I think the latter part, you also got that. Maybe we can take.
Yeah, I got. But what I missed the most was the questions. The question that was posed by Bongani, because I was kicked out whilst he was still on the platform. I don't know if I will be able to.
Yeah, we can give him just to say in short after Edgar.
Okay, thank you.
Edgar, over to you. Edgar, can you hear us?
Sorry, I can hear you. I was just trying to unmute.
All right.
So, yeah, it's very interesting, the point that Bongani raised around the debt trap that the other nations, basically, including those that are positioned inside the country, have outlaid for Black business, if I were to be specific. And also the fact that they've also taken over the narrative around how even transformation is executed. What I mean by that, ESD by nature is decided. And yes, we're supposed to drive. So Mr. Mabobo spoke about Triple P project as one of the pillar stones of SAPDF, but it does not end there. Whilst infrastructure and connection and creating trade hubs is very key, the other component is to drive business from ground, because it's only business, real business, being placed on the right infrastructure that can basically transform. But taking the point that Bongani is raising around the debt trap and the value chain, so the two components.
But now the same bag of fertilizer is going for about $20-25.
I want to talk to is that in terms of value chain, owning the value chain or disrupting the value chain, there are blockages in South Africa. Even though ESD is there and we spent billions on it, by design, we are just recycling companies that don't grow. They tend to be linear in their growth, or if they J-curve, we try to limit the J-curve and we start actually blocking their development. But again, to Bongane's point is that there are two things here. There's a value chain that we need to own or disrupt, and also there's a debt trap. So Bongane's question is actually containing very fundamental solution. So I'm not going to talk to Triple P. I'm going to focus on business development or economic development as part of economic growth. So if you look at that and taking what Bongane is saying and just flip it into a solution, is that one thing that we cannot run away from. If you're already trapped within a debt space, it requires you to focus then on the real assets that you might have. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So in South Africa, if I were to take an example of collaboration and value chain and all of that, there is a new market that is being created by green energy. So if you look at the petrocarbonate companies like Shell, all these oil companies, they are now required to blend their product and blend it with ethanol and biodiesel. A lot of our companies are able to produce that. But when you come back to the point that Bongane is saying, is that in order to secure the feedstock that is required to supply just the first sort of blending requirement, I think it's 5%, you need almost 1 billion liters, and it's a captive market and we can supply it. But the challenge that you're gonna have in South Africa is that if you have to then, to Bongane's point, integrate the value chain right from primary, let's say you produce soy and you supply the vertical upwards all the way to the shells. The challenge that you will face if you're trying to operate from South Africa is your feedstock and producing the inputs at the right price. So what then happens is that the other side, the white side, has already, the agri space in South Africa is run by white farmers. We know that only 4% of agriculture really is in our hands. So what then happens is that there is a captive market that has been necessitated by legislation to say everybody blend. Now, if the commercial farmers are the one that own the land, then you are asking the question that how do Black South Africans participate in this? Yet, yes, government has said priority must be given to Black people for the blending legislation. But the difficulty is that if you look at the value chain again, the value chain, nobody has the space to produce this. Then it just tells you that before it even happens, already that market is going to be taken by white business before you even start playing the game. The only way we can disrupt this, but there are things that have been thrown into the legislation that say you can't import, for example, from Zambia. Zambia may have a ARISE program, which currently makes available 1 million hectares of land for usage, which could be used, part of that land can be used to make a biodiesel processor that is from Soweto or township economy to produce right in the heart of Soweto. And as long as you are closer to the refinery in Alberton, you can produce from Soweto, you can transport to Alberton, and you can create large operations right in the heart of Soweto, supporting the township economy. But the legislation, and I always wonder when people put these little clauses that block certain things from happening, because the fact that you put a clause to block a Sowetan partnering with a Zambian from Western Province to create a value chain that is Black in nature, not so much South African in nature. But if you can give a South African person from Soweto volumes that are owned within our own ecosystem, at least within SADC, we can create the feedstock required to scale up to 10x
a business that we can start from scratch right in the heart of Soweto. But the difficulty of value chain is that before these businesses start to compete on different elements of competition, whether it's operational efficiency, any customer value item, we fail before we start because we don't understand that our strategy is flawed. And that's why at SAPDF, when you look at now the business format and the economic development as well as enterprise development, is that you need to think about all the things that were taken from us as Africans. So for example, we are separated into different components so that we cannot strategize beyond borders, because the reality is that even if you try to connect the dots and you try to scale up in South Africa, there are things that you don't own. There are things that will force you to go to the ecosystem that is trying to block you, to get permissions from those ecosystems. So that is the importance of value chain. And that's why I say Bongani is making a very critical point. The other one is debt trap that he's raising, now talking about the game of financial services. So unfortunately, Bongani is right. Financial services permeate all parts of our lives. Whether we know it or not, those who are in bonds, we know that we're basically renting from the banks. However, I think, Bongani, to just take a step at what you're asking, the awareness of this debt trap that you're saying, for me, the first solution is to be aware of it, which means that when investment comes in, and because Africa cannot avoid going to the system and getting some resources and being financed by the system. But I think as part of a strategy, you have to focus on making sure that you do not put all your resources as equity and hand over the resources and take the financial services in return, because we know that even in this credit debt trap, they are giving you money that they also devalue themselves, because they're going to print more money to create, to basically render the money that you take useless. And also they can switch coupon rates and make sure that they control the flow of money, almost at M1. So, but they can play the financial services, but the only way that Africa has to be effective at controlling this, you have to pay attention on the actual resources. In other words, the real resources, whether it's mineral, water, and all these things. And I'm going to pick one, for example. If you look at water in Lesotho, you look at water in Zambia, and you look at the future trends of where we are going to electrical cars. We know that solar is quite expensive, but because of lithium batteries. But now we are moving into hydrogen cells. These hydrogen cells, we're going to take water, which is companies in Japan. This is a new thing. I think even ESCOM is looking into it. We are going to take water, separate it into oxygen and hydrogen. And then a lot of companies in Africa, they want to take this hydrogen and go sell it overseas, and it will feed into the batteries. But the challenge is that when it turns back into water, it will already be in Japan, which is not a viable option. You want to create an environment that if you're going to use your water, because the way it works, you put water into a reaction, it separates, and then hydrogen becomes your oil, basically. Then you feed your hydrogen into a battery, and then you drive your car. But then the byproduct of that, it's going to produce water again, because it will react with the air. But that water has to land in Africa. In other words, we have to own the full value chain. I'm coming to this example that keeps coming up in different parts of the sector, different parts of the business. But this issue about water, it's the huge issue in how power is going to be introduced, to be produced in the future. But Africa, we are not looking at these resources. We're busy getting into a credit trap without protecting our water. But this water, or if you look at copper and lithium batteries, we are not protecting copper. We take copper and beneficiate it outside. So I think, I'm not saying that I've got solutions, I'm saying that, but the two things that we have to focus on is what Bongani said. Own the value chain. And if owning the value chain says that you have to break borders where you've got limitations, I think we should be prepared to do that. And also, we have enough off-takers, SADC. In other words, we don't even have to sell it off to your internationals. Yes, it's quick money to sell it like that. But if we don't put energy and beneficiate and also sell to each other, then competing, it's almost impossible. Then the debt trap is to be aware. And then it means that when we invest, we must reinvest the same way China did it. You invest by taking their money, taking their technology, and you learn over the years. And the idea is that then you can't withdraw too much, because if you withdraw, you cannot create value that can get you out of the debt trap. So one of the things is that we divest too quickly as Africans. We don't have a long-term range because we are already in a debt trap and we can't avoid it. Because even these projects we are talking about, one way or the other, they will be funded by the same system that you're trying to fight with. And you can't avoid it. You have to use the system.
I'm sighing and smiling at the same time. I'm actually learning quite a lot. Yeah, can I hand over to you, Mr. Mabobo, or you want me to also read the other questions that are coming through the chat box?
I think I will add to what Edgar has just mentioned. And thanks, though I missed the better part of Bongani's questions. I think in Edgar's answering, I was able to pick up his questions and his comments.
Right.
And I just want to take it back to what I mentioned earlier in this part of the discussion, that if economic development is driven by government, these challenges will not go away, because we know that governments have short lifespan, 5 years. And in so doing, the focus is not mainly on that which is long-term. It's in making sure that I go back into that space. So the reason why we had this conversation is to have like-minded minds, to sit down and say, we have seen the problem, we have identified it, and we think we have a solution. And the solution is being provided by the Continental Free Trade, which, if we go back, it seeks which the points which I used as an example, and I will go back to it. The agreement aims to reduce all trade costs and enable Africa to integrate further into global supply chains. It will eliminate 90% of tariffs, focus on outstanding non-tariff barriers, and create single market free movements of goods and services. This is an African Union agenda, and South Africa is a member of the African Union, and they are a signatory to this Continental Free Trade. So when you approach government and seek to address the clauses in their laws that contradict the African Union resolution of which they have been a signatory, they have to listen and align it, because it is aimed at taking out these barriers. It cannot be government doing it for us. It has to be us using the mechanism and the ammunition that has been given to us, which is this Continental Free Trade. And this is what I want us as business community to look into. History, yes, has told us that 6% of the world, I mean, the Jewish community, are the ones that drive the economy of the world. But that is not sustainable. We have seen it in South Africa. When you have a small community that is owning everything, the disruption that has happened in the destruction of the malls and everything is as a result of someone not having identity or connection with that infrastructure and the business that is there. So the risk of exclusion is too high. And that's what we need to look into for us to be able to continue and grow, grow the economy of Africa. We have to look at it from a positive position, learn from the past and go on. I mean, if a country was able to turn a desert into a city where everyone now wants to go and land there, what makes it difficult when Africans have got all the resources that the world is scrambling to take out of it? We have to come together, break these barriers, because if we want to look at it in isolation as South Africa, we won't get the solution. The solution is in looking within the whole framework of the continental free trade. It forces us to look at things differently and approach boldly our leaders and say, this is what we want to achieve. It's generational. And if you can't agree with it, these are the consequences. We have seen it now. If we continue to be quiet, unemployment is continuing to go higher and higher. We might see another eruption of the same violence that will make even South Africa to be inhabitable, which becomes now a danger, because the more you have unemployed people, the riskier it is for you to have wealth, because you will be a target for ease of helping themselves through illegal means. So that's what I want to add. And thank you so much, Edgar, for helping in answering. And I hope it addresses and it answers Bongani. And through you, the facilitator, Tembi, I think you've got our contacts, and we would love to continue communicating post this webinar, because it's a thought-provoking platform where we are now saying, let's come together with a solution. We don't at SABDF claim to have the monopoly of wisdom, but we start and we ask those that identify with that which we are saying to come on board, and we change the Africa to be the Africa we want, the Agenda 2063. It is in our hands. Thank you.
So true. And the idea indeed is not necessarily to sort of pose all the questions to you, but also to identify, solutions ourselves as participants within the platform. There has been quite a few questions which I don't think only Mr. Mabobo is supposed to answer, like Edgar has done. Others can also indicate. Mikatekiso Kubai, I think you should also raise the issues that you are posting on the chat box, because I think it will be quite important to also have them recorded, since on the video they may not appear as indicated. But one of the questions that he has raised, or maybe before that, are we teaching our people enough about the things that we are talking about here? Or this will only be focusing only on, or earmarked only for the people who would understand? I mean, some of the jargons that Edgar was saying, I was hearing them for the first time, and even acronyms. And I'm wondering if we are to also capacitate our people who are having, businesses, but not necessarily having information that we have, what approach can we use to make sure that they also get informed? Because if we have to collectively approach government, like you are rightfully saying, and indicating all the examples of clauses in policies that are probably, inhibiting us from participating in these free trades. I read somewhere that there's 2 trades that South Africa is participating in, but none of those is probably as effective as it's supposed to be. So are we really capacitating people enough, or even making them aware as a country about all this information that you are sharing with us, and how can we go about making sure that they are capacitated or informed? Mr. Kubai, may you please raise all the issues you were raising? I would really appreciate if you can raise it verbally. Thank you in advance. I see your face. Yes, I recognize you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. A lot of these, issues, colleagues and compatriots are already familiar with. The challenge, would be in where these discussions are concentrated. And these discussions, tend to be concentrated, in, very high and fairly deep areas of policy making. And perhaps, not as, widely distributed, for consideration and ideas and percolation and so on. Outside of the policy space, maybe you then may be thinking about academia or think tanks. Now, I'm raising this issue because just yesterday I attended this one webinar. They're talking about the competition currently going on between China and the United States, and it's relevant for us too here, by the way, as a middle power. It's relevant because the presenter, who's a veteran diplomat, gave an analysis of production in the United States versus production, in China, and the differences in the promotion of innovation systems, in the two countries. That has thus influenced the position that they both occupy right now in the world, particularly in terms of influence, where the Chinese influence is rising and the American influence is waning. Okay? The Chinese have invested very heavily, in productive capacity. Now they have a surplus productive capacity, whereas the Americans let go of a lot of regulation, right? A role of the state. Essentially, the state receded, allowing the markets to dominate, and therefore you had, a rise in financialization. All of these, consultants, coming, and creating business models, creating things, concepts such as shareholder value, which is now being disputed, and people are now talking about stakeholder value, and so on and so forth, right? Business practices, where you had, corporations now moving away from investing in productive capacity and investing instead in financial instruments, right? In order to make their books look, very pretty for, boards, and so on and so forth, and for CEOs to earn, huge sums and so on and so forth. Now, some of these economies that have done, things slightly differently happen to be our friends. They happen to be, countries that were with in the non-aligned movement. They happen to be, developing economies. We can learn a lot, from how they promote local enterprise, how they promote, small business, development, and how they use those, things to reduce poverty and so on and so forth. The Chinese, for instance, right, encourage young people to develop apps for cell phones to integrate services for villages, transport, health, and so on and so forth. In the same way, for instance, like when you app that you find, for instance, say your WhatsApp, how your WhatsApp works, or the National Health COVID app, and others. They are developing apps to tell villagers the weather, what to expect, from potential rain, in the season, what the health trends are, right? In terms of spikes, maybe say in a particular condition, or, that sort of integration. They're encouraging young people to develop those apps. And they consider this part of their governance. I happen to know this because I attended a lecture or lectures that they presented to the National School of Government. They have a relationship, and so on. Now, these are some of the things that we should start, to encourage young people, for instance, in South Africa to do, right? Find solutions using some of these technologies that are already available to South Africans, but even in, low income, groups in South Africa. Many people have cell phones, smartphones, and there is, quite a high degree of penetration, data penetration, smart mobile, telephony penetration, and so on. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing all of these things, in there, to perhaps encourage colleagues and compatriots, to engage, in some of these policy processes. You might want to look at, the National Planning Commission. The report they released last year in December, reviewing, the economic performance of the NDP since its publication, right? You might want to have a look at that, particularly in the area around participation, of wider participation in the policy praxis. I'm just saying, a small few, there's of course a lot, to be discussed that can be discussed. For instance, this Mistra thing that I've just posted here, Mistra has, encouraged the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, for instance, to consider establishing a metals exchange in South Africa, where, for instance, prices of, platinum group metals, for instance, could be determined in South Africa as opposed to in London, for instance. Yeah, things like that. So there are some of these things that are happening, some of these discussions that are happening, but they're happening in very few spaces. And a lot of the information that our people tend to access, tends to be not local information, but actually foreign information. In other words, we source information from the West, but we don't read our locally produced knowledge, our locally produced, research and works, and so on. I'll stop there, Mama. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for the inputs. I think government, one of the reasons we actually created this platform was because we realized that government speaks to itself. Whatever information that is available in government does not necessarily filter down to the people who might want to use it. It will be those who indeed will research more and, go to specific platforms and get information in order to capacitate themselves. Mr. Mabobo gave an example of the Somalian coming into the country and immediately starting businesses. Nigerian, or let's just say foreign nationals come into the country and immediately start businesses. Something we don't necessarily see with our people. And I think the question that he raised in the beginning, or towards within his presentation, of the fact that where are South Africans is quite key. We do reviews of these policies. We do assessment of these policies, review, but the implementation part is not necessarily assisting in making those small businesses, as he was presenting, to be able to flourish. And the capturing of being a tenderpreneur in order to have the vote still continues. So I think the discussion should go beyond just us always looking into government to make sure that it assists us. There's a session that we had in the beginning of this whole engagement, where we engaged one professor from the University of Free State, the Kwakwa branch. And the idea was to say the dependency is just becoming too much and it's not even going down. More and more dependency is growing. That's why people are now fighting, because nobody is educating them to say, you can be able to do this thing on your own. You can be able to do like the Somalians do, but we are not teaching each other as we are supposed to. Mathogonola, I'll also have to pick on you because I saw you were giving so much input, and I would appreciate if you can give some inputs before Mr. Mabobo come back.
It will also be good to hear her voice as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and it is well appreciated to have this platform. Today, I was on a resolution to be on the quiet front, and it's interesting that as the discourse was continuing, I was just reflecting inwardly to say that besides your voice, as a woman's voice, I know my voice is so thick that many people think that I'm a man, but I'm used to that. Besides your voice being a woman's voice on the platform, that we are doing what we usually do, being on the silent trap. We are talking the death trap, but for the women is a silent trap. That we might have valuable and noble contributions, and yet we would sit in meetings, we would be on platforms like this, and without much contribution that we would give towards making sure that what South Africa, even in the yesteryears, has always been speaking to is a women emancipation, and because we would not even be able to be participants and contributors in the space of the economy when we are not even part of the discourses meaningfully, we are not contributing meaningfully. And as I was listening, I was reflecting on some of the inputs given. For example, that you'd be amazed how many women structures and formations are there in the country, yet the kinds of conversations that we are having, and I'm participating in a number of them, the kinds of conversations that we are having are still, in silos. When it is women, peace and security, we would in the main focus on women, peace and security, and not bring in the economies to it. When it is about economic development, we are not looking at how we should have empowerment, grassroots. And you'd be amazed how many women at the grassroots level have the wealthiest contributions that are lost in the discourse of platforms like this, where there would not be a voice to speak for themselves. Besides the technology and the language barriers and other related resource challenges, you find that even when we as women would come on these platforms, sometimes we don't actually represent the very women that we are as we ought to, with that grassroots focus, with that indigenous way of being able to even contribute to the economies and do business. And many a times we and I'm gonna use this word sparingly and carefully. It is as though we are minimized to issues of gender-based violence, and as though there isn't anything else that we are worthy to contribute and to move. And interestingly, when you want to have serious movement, get a handful of women and things will happen. I mean, just last month, it was August month, and in South Africa, it would be the issue of the women's march of 1956, and yet we are in 2021, and there are significant contributions and inroads, be it in technology, be it in agriculture, economy-related sectors, where it's as though because women are not on the platforms, they are not contributing meaningfully. But we need to also not just look at these platforms as though they cannot be trickled down. I was thinking of how you know, in especially villages and communities. I come from a village. There are still conversations that, because from time to time there'll be programs that we'll be having in some of the villages. There are very worthy conversations amongst women also, and young, like intergenerational, young and old, that I believe would contribute meaningfully to platforms like this, when we could even afford some of those women data just to be able to connect, and they speak for themselves, not even us speaking for them. When we would allow them to speak in their indigenous language, and then we translate what they are sharing to this platform. When we would be able to have them share the indigenous knowledges in the area of economics and socio-economic educational factors, where we would be able to say, how do we actually connect women across the continent to do what they're able to do best, to be able to interact, to have conversations for greater benefit and greater good. I'm putting this in a generic way because I would not want to be speaking necessarily directly from what we are talking about, but to say, where is the gap and how do we unplug this gap, and how do we also make sure that it is not for us without us, so that the women are able to also contribute meaningfully from the very areas of interactions where we interact, and also strengthen that intergenerational element, because when we are not going to go back to each one, teach one. One is doing quite a bit of that in a number of communities where I interact, where even when you teach one woman, she is able to share with a number of women in the very community. And then there's a ripple effect, there's a multiplier effect that we need to bring. And lastly, also, to use the arts to be able to share messages in simple ways, to use the airwaves to share, I mean, the community radios. Are we having these discussions at that level, simplifying it to the level of communities? We have room to do that. Are we, when there are engagements, even though we can say it's a COVID era, there are still creative ways where interactions are still happening within communities. Are we taking these conversations there, even in a very simplistic and an everyday way, so that then we would have empowered women to be able to take forth the business trade in a meaningful and a significant way, and also control the part of the economy. Yes, I've had all the engagements around how, with all the challenges that we're having, be it debt traps and economic directions, certain things we're not necessarily able to just do just like that. But I've seen women do things without considering all those things and accomplish it.
Yeah.
They would be running communities with nothing, but before you know it, everything is available that has to be available, on word of mouth, on putting things together, on making things work, even and not even necessarily considering all sorts of protocols that sometimes are inhibiting, just being disruptors and getting things done. So I want to pause here and say, one is provoked again more and more to say, okay, let me just give this example. Now that we're talking, I was talking to one sister of mine from Zimbabwe. She's in the UK. They have a 50-hectare farm, already has produce, herbs and whatever. And we were talking about how we need to make sure that that farm is able to be a herbs farm, and the long and short of the story, to have beneficiation happening right there. What am I sharing with that? We were having a simple conversation, yet from that simple conversation, we're even able to get to the specifics of how even the Southern African Business Development Forum could be part of the interchange space for the very issues that we were discussing. So I'm saying Let's take the conversations in a simplistic way where they should be, and we'll see better results equally. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you so much. You see, if you haven't spoken, we didn't hear those. We really appreciate. Actually, what you are basically saying, let's all be active citizens and contribute somehow towards making sure that the people at the lower level or the people in our communities are also benefiting from all these trade agreements and all these things that are currently existing. I would actually love to have you on our platform as a guest, but I think we can have that on the side. And please drop your contact details so that we can be able to engage further. That is actually how we get guests. We get everybody and anybody who's willing to share. Last week we had a young person who just graduated talking about her view about social security system in South Africa, and it was quite wonderful how she viewed things. So that will be something that we're going to be looking at. Can I take Lumka? She didn't raise a hand, or he, but I just feel people cannot just log out without having said something. Lumka and then Nontlantla and Siputolo. Just few words.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. I was actually typing a chat because I was still trying to gather my words. I have a question about when it comes to funding, especially for startups, because I know of a female entrepreneur. She has a startup and it's manufacturing products that aren't manufactured in South Africa, yet they are manufactured in like China and like Europe. So she wants to bring that element to the country. Now, the problem is that she doesn't have the finances. She's approached the local banks and certain DFIs, and they only want to take certain risk. So they're like, no, it's a startup, it's a greenfield. They're not willing to take the risk. And then she got funding from DTI or IDC, but they only have a maximum threshold of how much funds they can give. Now she's in a shortfall and she can't get equity investors because DTI and IDC say that she needs to have the majority share, so that limits her financial capabilities. So now with this free trade and SADC, like how can we help her to garner the funds that she needs to get her company going? Because she's already purchased all the equipment that she needs to manufacture this product, but she needs the shortfall that needs to be secured for her to actually start working.
All right, noted. I believe Mr. Mabobo noted that.
Sorry, the network keeps on kicking me out, so I miss valuable contributions and questions. So some of them I will ask that you repeat them for me, and I'll be able to answer them. Yeah.
Okay. The last one that has just been raised is about accessing funding for startups, which I think is quite a huge hurdle for many people who aspire to be business people, which is something that I don't think government institutions are quite helpful as we would want them to be, but rather the other opportunities or avenues that can be explored for this person to be able to access funding is for manufacturing, which she has already started gathering some funds, but is not sufficient for her to be able to start the business as expected. There was somebody that I requested that they should speak. Nontlantla, anything to say? Even if it's just a comment. All right, Mr. Ngatsan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was
okay.
trying to find the unmute.
All right.
Excellent answers. Thank you to a very informative session. I don't have a question, maybe though I do have a comment. I was just intrigued by seeing the number of people who have attended the session, and it was very much informative. So I wonder, how would it be like if we were to all make it our mission to either maybe go and share it with the next person, because I believe that there are so many other people who can contribute from the knowledge before we even get to the funding part, because I do think there's a lot of us who want to play a part, but we just don't know how to, and we don't have the information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we can give you now the opportunity, Mr. Mabobo. I don't see you anymore. Are you kicked out? Okay, Andy Siwe, while we're still waiting for him to come back, I will indicate to him what was the question. Andy Siwe, you can speak.
I would like to emphasize, thank you for the opportunity, first of all. I would like to emphasize on the point that the chairman made in his opening presentation in regards to the PPP, how it's going to eradicate.
Sorry, we can't hear Andy Siwe.
May you please raise your voice a bit?
I would like to emphasize the point that the chairman, Mr. Mabobo, made in regards to the role that PPP will play in regards to eradicating poverty, especially for women. Here in my hometown in Oudtshoorn, I see a lot of young females participating in activities that minimize their value as women to maintain their living standards. I'm sure we are all aware of those activities. Now, the chairman mentioned that the PPP will eradicate about 70% of poverty by 2035. We as the youth of the country who have mothers and sisters and grandmothers who've been raised by these people, we would like to support the forum's vision in regards to the role that PPP will play in eradicating poverty, because
I think, Andy Siwe, I think your volume is quite low because the participants are asking if you can increase your volume. It may not be your voice, but the volume on your gadget.
Can everybody hear me properly?
Now we can hear you, yes.
I was saying, as the youth of South Africa who share the same vision as the chairman, we support his vision. We support what he has planned for the youth of the continent, because the youth are the ones that are the next leaders of this continent and what we have to offer. Young women in Oudtshoorn here in the Western Cape are participating in activities that devalue them as women to make ends meet. And by the forum's vision and what they would like to, and what the forum would like to achieve in making sure that the ladies of the continent are secured and not subjected to gender-based violence is a good approach. And I would like to say to the chairman that we support you. We appreciate your effort of leading us into transforming into a competitive continent, into a competitive country, and into competitive communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy Siwe. Mr. Mabobo, are you able to respond the other part about startups? I think it basically an indication of the fact that there's a need for assistance in order for people to cover for the shortfall that they might be experiencing or having whenever they start their businesses, which result in them not finally having such businesses running. That was one of the issues that Lumka raised. I think now we can give you an opportunity to respond, then we'll take Edgar. Those who have raised their hands previously, please lower them so that we shouldn't get confused. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I think in responding to what Lumka has mentioned, but having listened to it being thrown out of it, I assume it's on someone who has started and want to be assisted. The reason why we created a platform like this was for the purpose of creating these ecosystems. Because if you run this as an individual, the risk of getting funding is very, the chances rather of getting funding is very low because you are considered as a high risk. But when you are part of the ecosystem, you get the risk by being in that value chain. So I think we'll be able to have sideline conversations with Lumka. I happen to know her and the family very well, so I'll be able to assist and link her up with Edgar, that side, who will assist in answering the question. And I also want to mention to that which Tembi alluded to earlier, that how do we get this information to the relevant people on the ground. And if you look at what has been created in South Africa, we have CETAs, we have National Development Youth Agencies, we have CEDAs and all these agencies, including the Ministry of Small Business Development. But the role that they are playing, it's not the role that is actually assisting, because it has created an impression that when you go to those institutions, you'll get help, and you don't get the help that you are supposed to get. So it has necessitated that as business, we do it ourselves, to be making sure that we take this. I'll use an example, and it might sound insensitive, but I will use it. Most business people in South Africa post 94 was as a result of an act which changed into your previously disadvantaged, your employment equity and your historically disadvantaged, and people became millionaires overnight. Very few worked for the wealth that they have. That's why you see the disparity continuing. You have up-class businesses with millionaires, with middle class growing, golf players, and driving fancy cars, living in Sentin and around, but you still have Alexander and people that are continuing to be unemployed. And we don't have people that goes in there. You have organizations that are running businesses, but driving this particular agenda of saying, let me assist these small businesses, you don't get. We celebrated when Oprah Winfrey came and built a woman's school in South Africa. But those institutions of government are utilized. It's something else. So why am I raising this, Tim? It's the quality of leadership in government. You look at it from when people start raising their hands to be elected into offices. You find people going with guns to these elective conferences, and you want to be elected. So in short, we are electing thugs to lead us. So we don't love ourselves.